Yeah, are you having a child read? Are you reading a child? Are you having a student read or are you pronouncing? Or, yeah. So you focus on it.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Inshallah, we start with a quick recitation from one of our students. Brother Yahya was one of his program. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless him. Brother Yahya, Bismillah.
So do I just talk?
He said, Bismillah, and then you jump into the switch. You get to that level, you're going to start to come on. Okay? Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا صدق الله العظيم.
التكبير. إن شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. الله bless you. You can slide on.
Yahya.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I want to talk about something that is an epidemic in our times. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm not talking about RSV. I'm not talking about any other kind of illness that every second person I speak to seems to have gotten recently. But I'm speaking about another epidemic that is really a crisis. And it's an epidemic that doesn't just inflict the Muslim community. It's an epidemic that affects a lot of people. And this one epidemic, this one problem, there was a study from 2015 that was a meta-analysis. It was looking at the data from over 70 papers that had 3.4 million participants, and it showed that this particular thing was as great of a risk factor for early death as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This one thing that we're going to talk about today was as great of a risk factor to a person's health as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Meaning whoever smoked 15 cigarettes per day had the same health outcomes as a person who was afflicted with this thing that we're going to speak about today. Does anyone have any ideas? What was it? One more time? Oh, hookah? No. I'm sure that's like 30 cigarettes a day. Stress. We're looking for something more specific. Loneliness. Allahu Akbar. Loneliness. Social media might be 50 cigarettes a day, I don't know. But we'll get into that a little bit as well. So loneliness is something that if a person is afflicted with, seems to correlate, doesn't necessarily cause it, but it seems to correlate in health risk factors as strongly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Meaning when people withdraw from society or feel withdrawn from society, can't find a place in which they feel comfortable being a part of their communities or any part of society, the damage that that withdrawal does to them is as though they're smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we're not talking about staying out, not meeting with people for one big event and someone comes to you and says, you know, it's like you're smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We're talking about this being like a staple of someone's life, a very common aspect of someone's life. There was another survey that was conducted by the health insurer Cigna, and this was a survey of 20,000 adults that was conducted in 2018, and found that 40% of Americans said that they lacked a meaningful relationship and felt isolated from others. 40% of people. That means if we cut this room in half, almost half of the people in this room, statistically, say that they feel deprived of a meaningful relationship or they feel isolated. That's a huge number. That's a huge number of people. And I think an aspect of this is that this is a product of the modern world that we live in. The modern world that we live in, it fosters radical individuality. That it is about me. It is about what satisfies my personal happiness. There's an undermining of, what is good for the whole, what's good for my whole family. But it's more about what serves me, what gives me personal satisfaction. Because as we spoke about in another lecture too, the purpose of life, according to the modern Western conception of it, is to maximize happiness as much as possible. But we spoke about the purpose of life of a Muslim is far more valuable than the conception of just seeking happiness. Happiness is a transient feeling. It comes and it goes. But what matters is fulfillment. And if a person feels fulfilled in their life, then Allah Azza wa Jal, if they obeyed Allah Azza wa Jal, then Allah Azza wa Jal will give them that happiness that they seek. But will give it to them in the hereafter. But this dunya itself does not have the capacity to keep you happy all the time. It is the nature of the dunya that it doesn't have the capacity to do that. So to seek that from the dunya is to seek from it what it can't give you. فَاقِدُ الشَّيْءِ لَا يُعْطِيكَ. The one who doesn't have something can't give it to you. So to seek that from the dunya is to constantly seek to be disappointed. What is really strange about this being such an epidemic during our time is that we have never lived in a more connected time ever in history. It is unprecedented the level of connection that you have. You can open up your phone and see crystal clear someone who is on the other side of the world and you communicate with them in real time. When was this ever possible in the past? When people were sending messenger pigeons to each other, they weren't able to be as connected as we are in our time right now. You're able to speak to your aunt, your cousin, Fulan, Allan, Zayd, Ubayd, everyone. You're able to have some kind of connection with them. They're all, on your social media pages. So we have this conception that, we're super connected. But still we find that we lack meaningful relationships. We lack the kind of relationships that, like more so give us energy and not just numbers on a profile page. So when it comes to loneliness, the first kind of loneliness that I want to address is loneliness that is a manifestation of distance from Allah. There is no more severe loneliness that can plague anyone than to be distant from their Lord. Jalla fi ula. Allah Azza wa Jal is the one who created us and has made our being, our creation, to not be able to find satisfaction in the rest of creation in the way that it finds satisfaction in Allah Azza wa Jal, the way that it finds a connection with Allah. If you were created for Allah, what else will allow you to have that kind of fulfillment besides being connected to Allah Azza wa Jal? No amount of community service, no amount of friendships will ever be able to fill the void that comes from distance from Allah Azza wa Jal. And sometimes we withdraw from an attempt to come closer to Allah because we feel burdened, we feel anchored by the sins that we have. And it's important for us to remember that Allah Azza wa Jal loves to be close to us. And the distance that we have between us and Allah are a distance that we place between us and Allah. It is a distance that we place between us and Allah through the sins that we commit, through the heedlessness that we may have, when we don't pay attention to the reminder when it comes. All of these things are things that we do to distance ourselves from Allah. Because Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to come close to Him. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Hadith Qudsi, Yabna Adam, O son of Adam, إنك ما دعوتني ورجوتني غفرت لك على ما كان منك ولا أبالي. O son of Adam, indeed, as long as you call upon me and have hope in me, I will forgive you your sins and I will not mind. These sins that we do, often we think that almost like we feel too impure to come to Allah Azza wa Jal. We need to harness that feeling and say, it is only Allah that can cleanse me of my impurity. It is only Allah that can cleanse me from my impurity. Allah Azza wa Jal, when He speaks about Himself in a beautiful way in the Quran, لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه. That there is no place to find refuge from Allah except, where can you go to find refuge from Allah? Who can protect you from Allah? Allah. So you seek protection from Allah's anger in Allah's mercy. Because it is only Allah Azza wa Jal that can shield you from His wrath. No one else. No one else can give you anything that can shield you from Allah's wrath. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. When you're going to flee, you want to flee in the direction of Allah Azza wa Jal. Flee towards Allah. Fleeing is a word used to express running away from something. So flee towards Allah. So I know that we may feel this distance from Allah Azza wa Jal, but despite that distance that you may feel, Allah wants you to come back towards His direction. So this is the worst kind of loneliness that there is. Because people may have healthy marriages, they may have good lifestyles, they have money in the bank, they have a good job, but if they have distance from Allah, nothing will satisfy them. This is true loneliness. This is loneliness of the heart and the soul. Nothing can make up for this void. And it's interesting, you have like the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, who was jailed for a period of time. And he had one expression, and he said, what can my enemies do to me? What possibly could my enemies do to me that would harm me? If they were to jail me, then this is like khalwa with Allah. So this is time I get to spend with Allah. If they expel me from my land, this is hijrah for the sake of Allah. And he said, Jannati fi sadri. Jannati fi sadri. My Jannah, my paradise is in my heart, in my chest. This is where I have fulfillment here. This is a Jannah that people enter in this world before they enter it in the hereafter. This fulfillment that they find in turning to Allah, knowing that Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Allah is sufficient for me, whatever happens to me, and how incredible of a caretaker He is. Wa ni'mal wakeel. How incredible of a caretaker Allah Azza wa Jalla is. Another thing that's important here as well is what happens when we neglect Allah, when we forget about Allah. He causes us to forget ourselves. لا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. Do not be like the people who forgot Allah, so He caused them to forget themselves. So He caused them to forget themselves. When you forget yourself, you neglect yourself. You are not able to give your being that which it needs for nourishment. If you forget yourself, what identity do you have? If you neglect yourself, if you have forgotten yourself, it's like you don't know who you are. And what better of a time than today to see the examples that we have in our society today. When people forget who they are. Between Dhuhr and Asr, they've changed gender like 3 different times. Wallahi, like, they've forgotten like why they're put here on this earth. They no longer know how to make sense of the world in a meaningful way. This is what happens. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us this is the direct consequence of having neglected Allah. When you neglect Allah, it leads to the loss of yourself, the loss of your identity, the inability to nourish yourself with that which feeds you. Another kind of loneliness that I want to speak about is loneliness of the elderly. And I think we don't mention this enough. It is a modern phenomenon. It is a key modern phenomenon that we observe in our time that I don't know if it's ever been something that's occurred in the past. And that is when the elderly end up dying on their own. And there's no one to even realize that they passed away. And the way that people find out that they passed away is because the neighbor is smelling the rotting stench of their corpse from their home. Because no one has come by to pay them a visit. No son or daughter has given them a phone call. No one has thought about their condition. They've been handed over to the state maybe. That the state will provide for them some kind of welfare, and I don't have to worry about my mother or my father. And this is entirely antithetical to the way that we are raised in our religion. That Allah Azza wa Jal has made it, that He has paired it with the command of Tawheed, that we be good towards our parents. That we be good towards our parents. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And indeed your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Allah and that you show excellence towards your parents. So how could it be that there are people's parents who are passing away and people will not even find out about it for weeks, months after? So this is something that, especially in our modern day and age, that the elderly definitely feel loneliness. You distract yourself from the loneliness that you feel by pulling up the news, by pulling up social media, maybe reading a book here or there. But when your vision is gone, you don't know how to access technology, your hearing is gone, so you're not listening to the TV. How are you passing your time? Loneliness at that stage can be especially difficult to bear with. And as we saw from that statistic as well, I'm sure it also precipitates several health conditions that cause the mind to go, and other kinds of health conditions in which people don't know how to take care of themselves properly. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith reported by Bukhari and Muslim, لا يدخل الجنة قاطع رحم. لا يدخل الجنة قاطع رحم. The one who severs, the one who cuts the ties of kinship will not enter paradise. The one who severs the ties of kinship will not enter paradise. So one who does not sustain those relationships, especially with the most important people in our lives, is a person that can be deprived of paradise. Another kind of loneliness that occurs is loneliness that occurs within marriages and within families. And it may be ironic to us that how could there be loneliness if a person is married? And this is a kind of loneliness that can be especially frustrating because a person literally took the medicine, right? They did that thing that was supposed to give them companionship, give them company, prevent from them that feeling of loneliness. But instead, the way that they exist in that relationship is one in which they still feel lonely. They still feel like they're missing a partner because they don't engage with that partner in a meaningful way. Or a person needs to spend more quality time with their spouse or with that family member than they're giving them. Sometimes this happens with their kids as well. I think a lot of the times parents might not realize the need that children have for social interaction. There's a need, wallahi, there's a need for social interaction. There are doctors, I've heard that there are doctors that are writing prescriptions, not amoxicillin 4 tablets before dental procedure, but you need to go outside. You need to spend time with other people. This is what your problem is, that you have withdrawn too much from society. But as children, you don't have a car, maybe you're not even the age where you can engage with people online. You can feel especially deprived if you don't develop those social circles, those friend groups. So it's very important for us as parents to identify in our kids that does it seem like my kid doesn't have enough friends to play with? And sometimes it's not a quantity thing, a quality thing. Maybe they only have one or two friends, but you see, it's a good relationship that they have. It's someone that they're able to enjoy their time with. We benefit from being able to spend time with other people. And what's important to understand as well is that with regards to the need for social interaction, people are on a spectrum. There are those people that can live in their minds all day. They feel totally comfortable spending time with a book and seeing their friends maybe once a month or once every 2 months, and they're fine. There are other people that if they're not out and about in society, they're not seeing their friends, they're not interacting with their family more often, it is as though something very detrimental is happening to them. Something very significant is being kept from them, is absent from their life. So it's important to understand that maybe you as a parent don't feel the need to be spending time with your friends that often. Maybe you have a cup of coffee with some other friends once every 2 months, and you see your kids and you say they'll be all right if they're not seeing their friends often. But no, it's important for us to enable our friends to have good friendships with good friends and to understand there is a role for that. It's very important to foster those good friendships for children as well. Because even though you think to yourself, there's no way my son or my daughter could ever feel lonely because I love them so much. I, as a father, love them so much. How possibly could he feel lonely or she feel lonely? But it's not like that. We gain different things from different relationships that we have in our lives. We need friendships. We need that relationship between a mother and a father. And eventually, if a person's of a certain age, you need that companionship that can only be given through marriage. All of these different things are necessary and healthy level of engagement that we need with the rest of society. When it comes to marriage as well, there was a man that came to Umar radiallahu anhu, and he told Umar, "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, I want to divorce my wife." He said, "Why?" He said, "Because I don't love her." He said, "Because I don't love her." And Umar radiallahu anhu, he says, وَيْحَكَ أَلَمْ تُبْنَ الْبُيُوتِ إِلَّا عَلَى الْحُبِّ. That is love the only thing that marriages are, that homes are built upon, he said. And this is very important, especially because we become conditioned to think of love as like that feeling of butterflies in the stomach, that Hollywood love where it's like You see someone, you come home, and it's like fireworks in the background, and that's love. And if you don't feel that, suddenly it's like, do I still love my spouse? I don't feel those same feelings as I did before. And what has really happened is an infatuation phase has passed. Love happens after the infatuation phase. When you decide to stay with someone bearing all of the little idiosyncrasies that they have, all of the things that might bother you, realizing that you have plenty of things that bother the other person as well. So it's important to understand that just romantic feelings aren't the only things that keep people in relationships. There is mercy that keep people in relationships, and that should not be undermined. The Hollywood conception of love is not the only conception of love in marriage, nor is it the most valuable one. So that's important for us to consider as well. I know that there are a lot of people, especially I'm talking to the brothers. There are a lot of wives that complain that their brothers don't spend enough time with them. That they come home and they're just on the phone or watching the news or something, and they say like, "Oh, but I'm home. I'm home. I'm here with you," but they're not engaging their wives in conversation. There are a lot of sisters that feel very pained by this in a very real way. That it hurts them, that they feel that like they do not have a marriage, but they are cohabitating with someone else. They just happen to live in the same household, almost as roommates. That it's important to spend some time every day for meaningful time spent together. It doesn't have to be uh, something very long necessarily, but it's something that's regular. Maybe a cup of coffee, 20 minutes, where you ask your wife like, "How are you doing? Like, what is going on? Is everything okay?" Wallahi, these things should not be undermined. Like, these are things that are very important and parts of healthy relationships, that you engage with one another and don't just take each other's love and compassion for granted. That you understand that healthy marriages require work, and it means engaging that other person and showing that you care for them. And lastly, I want to speak about loneliness in society, when we feel lonely and isolated from the rest of society. And every single one of us, we have a desire for companionship, do we not? We have a desire for friendship, we have a desire for intimacy, we have a desire for companionship that Allah Azza wa Jal has put in us. This is a natural, innate thing. And there's reward in fulfilling this desire in a proper way. So Allah Azza wa Jal has made for us the outlets to fulfill this need for companionship. There are friendships and marriage that Allah Azza wa Jal has legislated. But still, we may feel lonely in the society that we're in because of the ways in which Islam is different from the rest of society. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told us, بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود كما بدأ. That indeed Islam began as something that was strange to the people. And indeed it will return to being something that is strange to the people. فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَى. Glad tidings to the strangers. Those people that remain strange. When the rest of society has gone off the hill, you don't tell yourself, I gotta go off the hill too. You tell yourself that this is the deen that Allah has legislated for me, and even though some people might think we're weird for practicing the deen in which we do, that this is the religion of Allah. What we need to do is to seek that kind of companionship, though, that is going to affirm our way, that is not going to allow us to feel so isolated. So, in a society in which you feel isolated by practicing your faith, it becomes especially important to have a connection to the masajid, to having a connection to the masjid, to keeping those ties of good brotherhood even stronger. Because the moment you stay away too far from the masjid, you isolate yourself from the jama'ah, that's when you go off track. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, or the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. The hand of Allah, the support of Allah is with the jama'ah, is with the congregation of the Muslims. The support of Allah is in us staying together. So that's very important. And I know a lot of people self-isolate even from the Muslim community. because they have, some kind of conflict with one brother or another brother, and so they decide to just stay away, not come to the masjid or whatever. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, المؤمن الذي يخالط الناس ويصبر على أذاهم أفضل من المؤمن الذي لا يخالط الناس ولا يصبر على أذاهم. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, the believer that mixes with the people and is patient upon their harm, is patient upon their harm. Because naturally, in engaging with one another, there's adha, there's harm, there's some kind of, someone says something you don't like, someone gives you a glance you don't like. It's important you don't cut the people off when this happens, right? Because this is a normal part of just interacting in society. People do things that you view as unpleasant to you. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever mixes with the people and is patient bearing their harm is better than the believer who does not mix with the people and is not patient with their harm. So the Prophet ﷺ did not come and preach to us, listen, if you want to worship Allah, each of you go to the mountains and go and seclude yourselves and don't speak to the people, only seek Allah. The Prophet did not say this to us. He told us that the person who mixes with the people is better if they can be patient upon their harm. And what happens, especially if we isolate ourselves for too long, we almost forget that this is a natural part of dealing with people. Someone might say something you don't like and so on, but the less you mix with people, the greater these little unpleasant trees become to you. It's like you lose the capacity to bear other people's different opinions, other people's, maybe little glances that annoy you or comments that annoy you and so on. So to cut yourself off entirely from them is to lose the ability to interact in a healthy way. Another point I want to mention with regards to this is that it's important for us to understand that when we communicate with people, that when they say something to us, it passes through a filter, right? They have thoughts and it passes through a filter. That filter is a product of their upbringing. It is a product of certain values that they have. It is a product of the way that they've been raised. So they say things through a certain filter. And then when we receive the things that they say, it also passes through a filter. A filter that is a product of the way that we've been raised, and a product of our values, and a product of XYZ factors. So it's important to understand that when we have trouble communicating with people, when people say something that we might think might be mean, understand that it comes from a different perspective. It's passing between these two filters. Maybe someone said something that you find unpleasant, but it's kind of just the way that they express something. That's how they're used to saying it. Maybe they don't mean it in the insulting way that you perceived it. So it's important for us to kind of be able to parse out and separate sometimes that people can say something that might be insulting to you, but they didn't mean to cause you that insult, and to give each other the benefit of the doubt. So just a couple of things in which we can speak about, hopefully tending to this pandemic, to this epidemic, and trying to overcome it, is to make the effort to be around other people. I know sometimes when we feel down, we feel the inclination to withdraw from other people, but it's important to try things out. A good brother invited you over for something, good sister invited you to spend some time together. Go spend that time. Make the effort to go outside of your bubble a little bit. Sometimes it comes with a little bit of discomfort, but all friendships kind of begin with a little bit of discomfort at one point or another before you become close friends. And then lastly, I want to say that it's important with regards to this that we're not looking for quantity of friends. We're looking for the quality of meaningful friendships. Quality of meaningful friendships. You might have one friend or two friends, but it's a good friendship. It's a friendship upon the love of Allah. It's a friendship in which you come together for good causes, for that which is pleasing to Allah. One of the categories in which Allah mentions people will be shaded by the shade of Allah on a day when there is no shade but his shade, وَرَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّا فِي اللَّهِ اجْتَمَعَ عَلَيْهِ وَتَفَرَّقَ عَلَيْهِ. Two brothers who come together, who love each other for the sake of Allah. Their coming together is for His sake, and their parting ways is for His sake. This is an incredible good deed that Allah Azza wa Jalla finds beloved. That we have those kinds of friendships, those kinds of interaction with each other, where we meet for something. The only reason behind that meeting was we came together for the sake of Allah. Whether it be some kind of community service, whether it be to remind each other of Allah, whether it be to support each other during the difficulty that we have. To do that for the sake of Allah is a really great deed that I think all of us should strive to do. So lastly, I just want to say, understand that a great portion of society is afflicted by these feelings. So if you don't feel those feelings, then make an effort to reach out to other people. Make an effort to reach out. Invite people to your homes. Spend time with other people. Inshallah, there's barakah to that meal that you share with someone else. That you come together, spend time with people in a meaningful way. Inshallah, Allah Azza wa Jalla makes that a reason for bringing our hearts together. So I ask Allah Azza wa Jalla I ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that He brings our hearts together, He rectify whatever conflicts may have existed between us, that if there are any grudges that have kept us from engaging with friends of the past, that inshallah Allah allows us to relieve ourselves of these grudges and be able to move on. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. I believe there's dinner today as well. Does anyone have any comments, questions, anything?